guys, it's Issy. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about graduate entry medicine interviews. I think literally like this week people got their their interviews for Birmingham and Warwick. And you know, since I've had interviews at those places last year as well as Southampton, I thought, why not talk about the graduate entry medicine interviews, you know, sort of my experience, and give a little bit of advice as well as answer some of the questions that you guys had asked me about them and give you a little bit of reassurance. So yeah, I know that feeling, you know, when you get that email, when you get an interview, it's so exciting, but at the same time, I had this like feeling in my stomach, like I felt a bit sick because the nerves for me, they were crazy. And of course, there's that added uncertainty with it being online. And congratulations guys, you made it this far. Like, it's not an easy achievement to get an interview, so well done, well done. So this is how I'm going to structure the video. First of all, I'm going to talk about Birmingham, then answer a few questions I got about Birmingham, then I'm going to talk about Warwick, and then I'm going to talk about Southampton. I am going to then answer the additional questions that I've been asked. So yeah, I got 3 interviews and then an offer from Warwick. Birmingham and Southampton didn't give me an offer, but I learnt quite a lot from, you know, looking back from the experience. So I want to share that with you. For those of you who are new to my channel, I'm a first year medical student at the University of Warwick, and I started this channel to document my journey through medicine and my lifestyle, and you know, just for you guys to get to know me better. You could say that this is sort of a diary. So if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn your notifications. And if you have any questions whatsoever, drop them in the comments below and I'll get back to you. So now I'm going to talk about my Birmingham and Warwick interviews. I'm going to talk about Birmingham a little bit first, and then I'm going to talk about Warwick, but I think the advice I'd give for both will be quite similar since they're both MMI. So with my Birmingham interview, and Warwick interviews, them being in the same week, honestly, it was kind of stressful. First of all, at the time I was working, so I had to like, you know, ask permission to get those days off, and then having to work and prepare for interviews as well was a challenge. It was quite an intense week. So I had a question that said, is the Birmingham interview intense? Like, from my experience, my honest opinion would be, at the time it felt intense, but looking back, I was quite like panicked during the interview. I was quite out of balance, out of touch, and everything, all my senses were heightened. So everything at the time did seem quite dramatic. But looking back, no, it wasn't as tense as I felt it was at the time. This is because I kind of spiraled during the interview. So I think, you know, the first 2 stations I was feeling good about it. And then I hit the calculation station, and for some reason, Issy didn't know how to do maths anymore. Like, my brain just turned to custard. And then like from there, it just went like, everything just fell out. And with the calculation station, my advice is to practice your GCSE maths, looking at data, doing calculations. The questions that time that I had were very doable. All the instructions were there. And I think it's because I was overcomplicating it. Just follow the instructions, make sure you read the question properly, and you should be able to answer the questions. And last year, like, the intensity was there. I think it's because we had 6 stations and they were about 6 minutes each, and each station was quite different, so had to switch up quite quickly, which is, you know, quite normal for an MMI. This year, your experience may be quite different with it being online, and you have 3 stations. So there's the role play, the ethical scenario station, and the calculation station. With the ethical scenario station, I spoke about, you know, knowing your medical ethics and things like that in my last video, so you should go and check that out. That will get you through this station, I believe. And as well with the role play, I haven't spoken about the role play much, but I think this one, that you're going to be communicating with someone about issues of substance. This is where I say it's important for you to be yourself. Like, try not to hide aspects of your personality, especially with it being online. You don't have the same presence as you would do, say, you're in person. So yeah, make sure you're communicating well, you're listening actively, all those sorts of things, paraphrasing. That's really important in, you know, communicating. Like, I don't think there's anything, you know, they're not expecting you to know like all these different skills, and they're expecting you to be doctors and all of that, but they just want to see that you are empathetic, that you can communicate well, that those are kinds of things they're assessing. Oh my goodness. And the morning of my Birmingham interview was just absolute stress. I remember my trousers were just doing the most higgy-hagger, like zip broken or something, like something was wrong, and then I had to like rush to New Look in Birmingham New Street after I'd gotten off the train, look for trousers, and then change my trousers, and then go to the interview. That morning was just a bit shambolic, to say the least, but I made it to the interview on time, everything was fine. But yeah, I think that didn't help me with getting worked up. So before the interview, make sure that there's nothing within your control that can distract you. So my Warwick interview was, I think it was 2 or 3 days later, and I stayed in like the Warwick Uni Hotel the day before, and yeah, I was so tired in the morning, but they had the most amazing breakfast in that place. Honestly, I remember being like, this breakfast is so good, but I can't even enjoy it because I'm so nervous. Yeah, with my Warwick interview, I think this is the one, I quite enjoyed this one. I think this is partly because I had an interview from Birmingham and I sort of learned from it quite quickly, like, Issy, you can't go in there just panicking anyhow. You've got to calm down. So I think with this one, I kind of got into the swing of things. From what I remember, we had 6 stations, and each station was about 6 or 7 minutes each. And like, I remember everything going so quickly. Like I said before, the MMIs, bang, 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 it's over. So like it says on the website, the things that they're interviewing for are, wait, let me just read it. Team working, insight, resilience, communication, empathy, probity, and respect and dignity. And you'll be observed and scored on the exercises by trained assessors. To be fair, I think that this interview was not very intense. This is because I kind of just took it in the stride and I didn't go in with too many expectations. Like I would advise for both the Birmingham and the Warwick interviews, MMIs, for MMIs in general, like, I think one thing I'd say is go into your interview with an open mind. This is because if you go in expecting a certain type of question, it can make your mind, how would I say it, your flow of ideas quite rigid. So I wasn't going in expecting certain types of questions. This meant that I was more likely to be able to, take my time and think. Like I said in my previous video, it's important that you don't learn things word for word. This is because you could end up just preparing for certain questions and not preparing for an interview. It's important that when you're preparing for an interview, you prepare for how to answer questions. So you have the information necessary for you to answer the questions. For instance, you have examples of different things that you've done, examples of when you were a good leader, blah, blah, blah. All the necessary things that you need for an MMI interview or an interview in general. This way, when you come to answer things, you're not rigid in your thinking. And sometimes, maybe they'll throw a completely weird and unexpected question in your way, which can take you aback. But then you're more likely to, sit down, think, and answer the question. And with the MMIs, even though you don't feel like you have time, it's also really important that you do not jump into a question. You're allowed to have 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds to think. Especially with things like ethical questions, for example, you need to think about it, because although you're going to be able to read the scenario before you go to the station, you're not going to have the questions. So if they ask you a question, you're going to have to think about it. And I think that's one thing that I didn't do when I had the Birmingham interview, is I kind of just jumped into answers but didn't really think because I was panicking. I remember at Warwick, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there was a question that threw me off, and I said to the assessor, I was like, is it okay if I take a few moments to think? And boy, did I think. I was fumbling and mixing my words and stuff, but that's okay. I think it's good for them to see that you're being natural and you're being yourself when you're answering questions. There's absolutely nothing wrong with needing to take time to answer something. There's nothing wrong with feeling a bit shocked. When you do feel shocked, you just take a breath and you think about it and answer. Even if you think that your answer was rubbish, just take a stab at it. There's nothing wrong with it. Also, I think it's quite good that you're able to tackle things, especially being under pressure. I'm not gonna lie to you. The person in the next station does not know what you did in the previous station. I can't stress this enough. But this is something I learned from the Birmingham interview especially, is that even if you think that you've mucked up a station, that is absolutely fine. The next person does not know who you are and they don't know what happened in the last station. So you should think of it as a clean slate. Try not to let what you've done in a previous interview station affect what you're going to do in your next stations. As difficult as it is, I know, because you're just one mind, you're just one person, but try the best you can to separate it. This is because if you feel like you mucked up one stations, you have the rest of the stations to give yourself the maximum opportunity to do well as much as you can. At the end of the day, you don't know how you've done in a station, that even if you feel like you've completely messed it up, the person assessing you might think completely opposite. So try not to overthink how you've done in a certain station. Don't worry about it. Just try and move on the best you can. And I know it's easier said than done, because here I am talking, but when I was in Birmingham, I was doing all sorts, getting panicked and everything. So it's very understandable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my Southampton interview. This is because I had a question about what is panel interview like compared to MMI. I remember my Southampton interview, I was quite anxious about it, especially because the format was different. So with this, there was a panel interview and then a group task, and the group task in particularly was making me really anxious, because I'd never done anything like that in an interview before. So it was kind of unknown territory. But I remember the panel interview, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about because I want to compare it to the MMI. So with the panel interview, I got asked about my personal statement and about me, and it was quite conversational and quite relaxed, and you know what, I quite enjoyed it. But the one thing that I didn't like about it was the fact that when I felt like I messed up, I was still sat in front of the same two people I'd messed up with. Whereas with MMI, it wasn't like that. It was if I thought I'd messed up in a station, I could move on and the next person wouldn't have a clue what I did in the other one. But with this, I kind of there was a point in the interview where I kind of started to mix my words and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with mixing words, but I felt each time I was getting unsure, it just knocked my confidence just that little bit more. And I didn't have that that switch up that you would have in MMI. The thing is with MMI though, I don't feel like the person that's interviewing you really gets to know you compared to when you're sat 20 minutes in a panel interview. I feel like there's more time for them to get to know you, kind of absorb your personality, all that sort of stuff, and get a feel of who you are. But the thing is, weirdly enough, I actually prefer MMI. I think it's because it's very fast paced and it's changing, and I just kind of like the way it works. I think it's because as well, I had both MMIs beforehand. So I'd already gotten used to doing MMIs, and then with the panel, it just felt kind of weird. So yeah, I think maybe just the kind of person I am, I prefer MMI. But the real advantage with panel is that I feel like the interviewers can really get to know you. And then I'm not really gonna go into the group task much, just because I'm not too sure if, with things being online, if that's going to happen. So I'm going to talk about it briefly, but if there are any places that are doing group interviews online, I'm very happy to talk about that in another video, just because I'm used to working in a group in my degree and stuff. For now, I'm just going to talk briefly about it, very briefly. So the group interview, it wasn't so bad because they kind of the medical students that were already there, they kind of had the group sat at a table. So we sat at a table before the interview started, and we sort of got to know each other's names, got to know each other a little bit. So it wasn't just we were walking into a room of strangers and having to do a group interview. So there was kind of that rapport between people. And then in a group interview, we had the chance to read a task, and we sort of had a discussion, and you know what, I quite enjoyed it, and it was quite practical, and it was nice to communicate with people and like voice your opinions and things like that. I'm not going to say much more about that because I'm not too sure what it's going to be on like in terms of group tasks online this year, but do feel free to leave a comment below if they are happening, and I'm very happy to address it. I also got a question: are graduate interviews similar to undergraduate interviews, and what's the difference if there is one? To be fair, my only experience of undergraduate interviews was for the University of Exeter Medicine, and that was a multiple mini interview. In terms of the format, MMIs are quite similar. You switch between stations, you wait outside, read a scenario, you have like probably a minute break in between. In terms of the format, it's not so different. Even with the questions, I don't feel like they were that much different, but the only thing that I could say that they could possibly ask you with graduate compared to undergraduate is about your previous degree, your previous experience. So like maybe, this is just making stuff off the spot, but something like, how did your degree help you in your decision to study medicine? How's your experience helped you in the decision to study medicine? Why didn't you stay doing your previous degree, or why didn't you take another career path, or something like that? So I think the possibility of you getting questions about your degree and your job or role or career right now, that might be something that they're more likely to ask in a graduate interview. But even still, I'd say prepare as you would for the undergrad as you would for a graduate interview. Like, I think that, you know, the questions from just my experience are quite similar, and you should prepare with the same intensity for both. I think because you have experience, because you have a degree, they could ask you about this. But with undergrad, they could still ask you about experience, but it's different. Like, because they're interviewing undergraduates, they're not going to ask about a previous degree. With the interviews, all I can say is that you will be absolutely fine. Go in with an open mind, make sure you're prepared, and, you know, just try and enjoy it as much as possible. And be yourself. Like, be yourself. It's very important that you be yourself for an interview. Like, I'm an advocate for being yourself at an interview. Like, there's nothing wrong with showing a bit of personality, especially because you know, it's online, so that physical presence isn't there. And like I said before, with the interviews, keep an open mind, and don't forget to smile. Like, obviously, if there's a scenario and they said that their cat died, like, of course you're not gonna smile, but it's very easy. Trust me, in Microsoft Teams in the morning, I can look grumpy as ever, and people can look a lot more glum than they actually are. Try as much as you can. I know it's easier said than done. That's it for today, guys. Good luck. Best of luck with your interviews. I really hope that this video has helped you and given you some reassurance. I know it's nerve-wracking, and I know that you have a lot of pressure on your shoulders right now, but trust me, you can do it. Don't forget the usual, to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. All the best, and see you in the next one.